Okay, now we've started recording. Kind of started the recording a little bit late. And this is the last question on the practice quiz that we're at right now. Number 3, find h of g of f of x. I'm going to give you all 30 seconds more. And if you notice in the future that I haven't started the recording, if you'll give me a reminder, I'd much appreciate that. Okay, let's look at this. We work inside the innermost parentheses. Replace f of x with 2x squared. Okay, and give me some extra. So check your mic, make sure you're muted.
Oh, Mr. This screen.
Pardon?
We can't see the screen.
Oh, okay. Let's go into the text channel. Okay. If you're having trouble seeing my screen, the first thing to try is close out Discord and then reopen it again and then join the live stream again. And how many are having trouble seeing the screen? Go ahead and text me. Just put a Y if you're yes, you're having trouble seeing my screen. Okay. Few folks having trouble. Okay. So, more than a few. It had been going good for a while and then...
Like right now it's frozen on the screen that you were... the recording screen?
Okay, it's still showing the recording screen and frozen.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're hearing my voice okay, but...
kinda.
Oh, it's even distorted on my voice, huh? Let me close out of my Discord and come back into it. So then you'll have to rejoin. All right. All right, can you hear me now? No. All right. Did that do anything? Or is it still exactly the same? Working for it? You can hear, but you can't see. All right, let me see how many there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. Let me ask again. Type in Y if you're still having a problem. And okay, couple folks. Type in OK if it's coming through okay for you now. Alright, we're going to keep going on here. There's a few folks that are going to have a problem, and you might You might have to watch the video if worse comes to worse. Okay. Alright, let's come back to this one, and this is H, and I'm hearing somebody typing away, so check on your mute. Okay. Now I need to do the G of this thing. G of anything is 5 minus 2 times that thing. So 2x squared minus 7 is going to go here and here. I'm going to simplify this down. When I distribute this negative 2 out, I get minus 4x squared plus 14. So the 5 plus the 14 is going to make 19 minus 4x squared. So I simplified this down, and I still have to do h of that. But what does h of anything really mean? Oops. H of anything means that thing divided by 3 minus that thing. So 19 minus 4x squared is going to go up here and here. So it's going to give me 19 minus 4x squared over 3 minus 19 minus 4x squared. And distribute this minus sign, it's going to be minus 19 plus 4x squared. So this is going to equal 19 minus 4x squared all over. Now 3 minus 19 is negative 16 plus 4x squared. Alright, so thus h of g of f of x is equal to this. 19 minus 4x squared, and I'm going to turn this around, put the 4x squared first, minus 16. The 4x squareds don't get to reduce, nor does the 16 reduce. It's kind of like this. 8 plus 3 over 8 plus 2. You don't get to cancel the 8s. This is 11 over 10, and that's very different than if you canceled out the 8s. So, since you can't reduce there, you can't reduce over here. If there's any addition or subtractions, you're not allowed to reduce that fraction. Alright, so very interested in finding out about the feedback on this one, on number 3. Are you good to go with this, or do you need more review on this kind of a thing right here, especially with 3 functions together? Let me know where you're at. If you type it in, don't hit enter quite yet though. Okay, go ahead and hit enter. Where are you at with number 3? Okay. Alright, so it looks like we need some more practice on this with 3 functions. We're kind of mixed, but we could use some more practice. Alright, and questions now on homework. Any questions, any problems? Okay, yesterday I was teaching a class and we had some problems for a little while and then they seemed to kind of iron out. It's like periodically, like there's some rough times. Okay, and yeah, Beverly, you might have to watch the video. Because sometimes it's just too frustrating when it's just like the screen is frozen and so on. All right, no questions on any of the homework. All right, let me. Yes.
I had a question on 44.
And is this on 3.4?
Yeah, the last homework that we had.
3.4,
last
number
week?
44. Okay.
Yes.
Here it is. I'll capture all this. Alright, so we're looking at this one. Now f of 1, so this is a mistake right here. This is supposed to be g of x. Because you see there's a little f here and a g here, and you just made a mistake up there. Alright, so f of 1, we're going to look at 1. We're going to go straight up or down from 1 until we reach our function, and then we see what the height is. And it's 3. F of 1 is 3, so this is g of 3. It's kind of like if this was a stock market curve, what's the price of the stock on day 1? Well, it's $3 a share. Okay. And then we need to do the g of 3. So we come over here and we take 3, and what will be the price on day 3? We go straight up and we read over, it is 4. And that would be it right there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I also had a question on 69.
69.
Yes.
Okay. So let's take all this. And okay, so this is equal to, you write them in the same order, and then you do the innermost one first. Just figure out what f of 3 is. F of 3 is negative 1. Then we find g of negative 1. So the input is negative 1. And the g of negative 1 is 0. And then we are done. And your name is?
Sorry, Sasha?
Sasha. And does that answer this question, Sasha?
Yeah, because I was a little confused because I was getting the other ones, but not this one for whatever reason.
Okay,
But
gotcha. I think some of these are a little strange to just get used to at first. All right. Any other questions?
Hi, this is Vanessa.
Yes.
I had a question on number 30 of 3.4.
Number 30. Okay, so let's get the directions as well as the problem. And all right, so we're doing number 30. So I need, all right, and I'm going to do this one in a kind of a strange way. You may be totally unfamiliar with this, but this is another way to look at functions called a function machine. Suppose an input came in like the number 8. What's the first thing you would do to the 8? You would have to do this part first. Take the cube root of the 8. And then you'd get 2. And then the second thing you would do is then you'd add 4 to get 6. And then what would come out would be this. So if 8 was the input, you'd get 2 and then add 4, 6 would be the output. And we can kind of think of this as a process. H is like all the things that you do to take an input into its output. Alright, so the first step right here, we're going to rewrite this h of x as f of g of x. Now, it's the inner part. Remember when we're doing it, this happens first. So the thing that happens first has got to be the one inside this. So g of x is going to be, I'm going to make it the cube root of x. And then f of x would be the next step. But the cube root has already happened, so we don't need to rewrite that again. It's just adding the 4. So it could be just whatever the input is, take that input plus 4, like this. Now this is my guess as to what f and g are. Let's check. F of g of x would wind up being f of the cube root of x. And f of anything is that thing plus 4. And that's checking my work. So this is it. Does that answer your question? Was that Vanessa?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh,
I also had a question about 12.
all right. Alright, so I'm going to do, it asks me to find f of g of x first. So I'm going to do, replace the inner one first with what its value is. Now I'm going to do f of that. But f of anything is you square that thing. And then you add 1. Now when you square a square root, it's kind of like this. Suppose you square and square root the same number. What effect do these have on each other? The 2 makes the 5 grow to 25. The square root makes it shrink back to 5. It's these two kill each other off. Same thing here. The square and the square root kill each other off. Now this all came in at once, so I kind of like to have 10 parentheses there. But you don't really have to have parentheses there. And then the 2 and the 1 add together to be 3. So that's f of g of x. And then we also need to do g of f of x. And that's, you replace the inner one first. Leave this one there. So f of x is the same as x squared plus 1. And g of anything is the square root of that anything plus 2. So x squared plus 2 goes here and here. X squared plus 1 in it goes here, came in all at once, plus a 2, which is square root of x squared plus 3. Okay, and the homework that y'all turned in the first week was 3.1 and 3.2, and on 3.1, when my post was about my internet service going out this last weekend, and so I didn't get through all the grading, but I got through a fair part of 3.1 and noticed a couple problems that I wanted to go over. One of them was number 28. So and you'll see in the post when you read that, the announcement, that the homework, if you don't have a grade on your like 3.1 assignment, you'll have a comment on it, and it'll tell you which problems to redo. Well, this was a common one that I was asking a number of folks to redo, and not too many people had problems with the first part of it. F of x negative 5x squared plus 2x minus 1. Where people had the most trouble was this. One of the last things it asked you to do was f of a plus h. Okay. And so let me just show you what this problem looked like. 3.128. This was on page 194. Okay, it asks you to find f for all these things. So actually it's probably a good idea if I show the problem as well as the answer. Okay, so if we're doing f of a plus h, this is where I saw a number of errors. Every time you see the x, it gets replaced with a plus h. Okay, and then we're asked to simplify this. And my first instinct, if I've been away from math for a long time, might be to do this. but that's not correct. To square out two things when there's more than one term in there, so being added, you have to write it twice. And then this one we can distribute. And then how I'd probably choose to multiply this out, I could distribute this, but I could also just multiply those two together first. And when I do this, I'm going to get a squared. See, here is what you're going to be missing is the middle terms. There's going to be an AH, and then another AH, and they're going to give you 2AH plus H squared. So you can do this, and this, and it all gets to this. And then you keep going and you add your like terms. Alright, and the other one that I wanted to go over was number 36. And most people did A just fine. The problem was on part B. So let's just do part B. When it says solve PC equals 2, most folks were putting in 2, not for the C, but for the P of C, so it goes on the left. So you're doing okay to this point. Alright, it's here that people were having difficulties. Alright, the main thing to realize here is that this is called a quadratic equation. And the way you solve quadratic equations is number one, quadratic equations, no matter what, we always set to 0. What does that mean? It means get one side equal to 0. That's always the first step. And then you factor, and if it doesn't factor, you use the quadratic formula. Now if you went through Math 109 to get to this course, they also taught you something like completing the square, but we only use these two methods because it's really quick, this or this. It's faster than completing the square. So we look at this and we say, can this factor? And we don't spend too much time. If it doesn't factor, we just go right to using a quadratic formula. C times C has got to give me C squared. These two numbers that I put second have to multiply to be a negative number, so we do the signs next. If they multiply to be negative, it must be one positive and one negative. We could put plus and minus, or minus plus, doesn't matter, as long as one positive, one negative. And then two numbers have to multiply to be 2. There's only one choice, 2 and 1. But I want to make the larger number positive so that the middle term turns out to be positive. And if you FOILed this out, you'd get C squared minus C plus 2C minus 2. The two middle terms of negative C plus 2C would add up to a plus C. It would look just like this. So then you look at this. What value of C causes the first, if two numbers multiply to be 0, the only way that can happen is if one of the numbers is 0. What number causes C plus 2 to be 0? Is when C is negative 2. What causes C minus 1 to be 0? When C is 1. So you get two solutions for this. And quadratic formula. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. If that's the case, then x quadrant is negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So if you're rusty on the quadratic formula, you need to line up, you've got to memorize. It's one of the few formulas. Don't emphasize memorization in any of the math courses that I teach, but I point out the few formulas that you really have to memorize. And this is one of those, quadratic formula. In this, in any math class or any science class that has college algebra as a prerequisite, it will be assumed that you know the quadratic formula and that you can pull it from memory whenever you need it. And if you ask like a retired engineer, what's the quadratic formula, they'll be able to spit it out in a flash. And people that work with math and stuff, this is a really basic formula they use regularly. Alright, we're at a break time, so we're going to take a 15-minute break. We'll start again at 1:39. Just in? Yeah. Which one? Is it really a test? Is it calling a quiz? writing some things yesterday, Neil? Good. Okay, did you like it? Are these like the extra soft ones? They're really soft. Pardon? It's not great. Yeah. We're getting that right. Hey, Don, how about tennis Friday at 5 p.m.? we will get started again. And we're heading to the new material. It's more on composition of functions. And we start with this problem. Example 1. All winter coats have been on sale, $100 off. Some have still not sold. As well as being $100 off, these coats are now reduced to 75% of their sale price. So there was a first markdown, which was $100 off, a second markdown, which was reduced to 75%. So really 25% off. Okay. So part A, coat's original price was $900. Find its price after the first markdown and then after the first and second markdowns. So what I want you to do is work on this individually, but go into your group chat and be ready and go ahead and type up your answers as soon as you get them for first and second markdown, but don't hit enter yet. Wait until my cue, and then I'll have you look at what other people have put down as well. So work on your own for a little bit. I'll give you a minute. Okay, go ahead and hit enter, and you can see what other people in your group are on, and you can talk it out too if you have different answers. Give a little bit more time for that. Okay, group 5, what's your price after the first markdown? Group 5.
I think I'll pass.
You'll pass? Okay. Well, let's go with group 2. What's your price after the first markdown?
We got $800.
So you subtracted 100 from the initial 900. Okay, and after the first and second markdowns, what do you have for that?
We got $600.
Okay, so it was 900 minus 100, giving you the 800. And then it was, how'd you get the 600?
I found out 75% of 800.
Ah, 75%. Because 800 was what you started with. And if you punch this out in your calculator, same as 3/4 of it, which is 600. $600. So after the first and second markdown, it's 600. Everybody agreeing with this? I agree with this. All right, do it again. This time, the original price is $1,300. And again, do it on your own and enter your answers into your group channel, but don't hit enter. Type them into your group channel, but don't hit enter yet. 30 seconds more. Go ahead and hit enter. Look at your other responses. You can discuss if you need to. Okay, and quick reminder, group leaders, you should be letting your group know who the spokesman for the day is. And first time you talk during the day, spokesman, if you'll please say what your name is before you start. Alright, well, let's go with group 3. What do you have after the first markdown? Yes? I heard something, maybe a mic problem or something. Let's go to group 6. What do you have after the first markdown?
This is Sienna. We got $1,200 after the first markdown.
Okay. And after the first and second markdowns, what do you have?
$900.
So 1,200, and did you multiply by 0.75 like this?
Yeah.
And then you got 900. Okay. All right. So now we make it a little more abstract. Coat's original price was X dollars. Find its price after the first markdown, after the first and second markdowns. Again, type in your answer, but don't hit enter until my Q. Okay, go ahead and hit enter. And group 1, what do you have after the first markdown?
Can we pass? We don't quite understand the question.
No problem. Let's go to group 4. Group 4, are you there? Group 5. Price after the first markdown.
This is Lily. So the price after the first markdown would be X minus 100.
It is. So X could be the 900. It could be the 1200, 1300, or whatever. We subtract 100. Okay, and what's the price after the first and second markdowns?
The price after the first and second would be X minus 100 times 0.75.
X minus 100 times 0.75. Just like this, how I wrote it?
No, parentheses around X minus 100. Since the whole thing's times 0.75.
Yes. Or you could even put 0.75 out in front times X minus 100. Either way that you write it, would look like that. Okay? And any questions? Everybody okay with this? Okay, let's go to the next one. So X is the price of a coat. F is a function which gives the sale price only after the first markdown. Remember, the first markdown was $100 off. G is a function which gives the sale price only after the second markdown. Remember, the second markdown is taking 75% of the original price. And then H is a function which gives the sale price after both markdowns. So, what I want you all to do now is to see if you can do F and G. If you can do H, go ahead and do that as well. But take some kind of a guess, if you can, on F, G, maybe even H. But I'll give time after we do together F and G, and I'll give you time to think about H as well. Type in your answer for your group, but don't hit enter yet. I think there are there's 6 groups. Okay, go ahead and hit enter on what you have, especially for F and G. And let me ask group 6, what do you have for F of X?
For f of x, we got it equals x minus 100.
X minus 100. So if the input was 900, you get 800. The input was 1300, you get 1200.
Correct.
Okay? What about for G of X?
For g of x, we got that it equals x times 0.75, like 75%.
Ah. Let's put, I'm going to put the 0.75 in front. 0.75 times x. And that'll give it to 75% of what it was before. If you multiply by 1, then it's 100% of what it was before. If you multiply by 0.5, it'd be 50% of what it was before. Alright, now, let me pause for a little bit and give you a little more time. If you haven't gotten all the way to H, let me give you another minute or so. H is a function which gives the sale price after both markdowns. And type in your answer for H, but don't hit enter yet in your group. Okay, go ahead and hit enter. See what other folks are doing. All right, group 3, what do you have? For H of X. No answer from group 3. Alright, so groups 3 and 4, would you hang after class for a minute? I just want to check in with both of you. Group 1, what do you have for H of X?
We got x minus 100 multiplied by 75.
How should I write that? Tell me exactly how to write it.
What do you mean?
You said x minus 100 times 0.75, like that?
I'll just multiply, yeah.
All right, it's really close. You have the right things, but we need something else. The x minus 100 has to happen first. If I just write it like this, the multiplication will happen before the subtraction, because that's the order of operations. So the way to make sure that the 100 happens first is you got to put this in parentheses. Parentheses means do me first. And then we'll get this. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the function that puts both of them together. All right. Now, we have these three questions. Oh no, these are numbers that shouldn't have been in there. All right, so let me, all right, which of the following is true, either number 1 or number 2, with regard to this? So, let me have you analyze that for a minute. And again, type in your answer, but don't hit enter yet for your group. Okay, go ahead and hit enter. All right, group 5. Which one of these is true?
This is Lily. We decided on number 2.
And why did you pick number 2?
Shoot, 1 second. We picked number 2 because, we picked number 2 because, the, first deduction, I really can't articulate this. I don't know why.
I think you're right there. The thing that's going to happen first has got to be what?
The first deduction is fx, so it has to be on the inside.
That's
so it
right.
happens.
The thing that happens first, you got to subtract 100 first, so that's got to be on the inside. So this is false, and this we can check our answer. It's g of, replace the f of x with x minus 100, and then g of anything is 0.75 times that thing. So this is exactly it. This is the same as what we wrote. You can put the 0.75 in front or behind. Alright, then, alright, we have this. Alright, I got, alright, here we go. Things get piled on top of each other. Alright, so now, the directions are label each arrow as either F, G, or H in the diagram below. And what we're doing is we're going from the original price of the coat, the price after the first markdown, the final sale price, which one of these is which. And let me give you a minute. Okay, go ahead and, well, this one is really hard to kind of collaborate on. So let me just ask group 1, which one is F?
We think that F is the original price.
All right, now F is actually not quite this circle. It's one of these arrows. Which of these 3 arrows would F be? And that's a good distinction to make. It's not necessarily a circle, it's a function going from an input set to an output set.
The bottom left arrow.
That's right. It takes the original price and gives you the price after the first markdown. Where does the G go? Same person, group 1?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Oh, where does G go? And then where does H go?
The G would be the bottom right arrow, and H would be the top arrow.
That is correct. So what a composition of 2 functions does is it goes from the input set of the first all the way to the output set, while these other 2 were going one at a time. And notice also G had a special role. The input of G is the output of F. It had to be that way for us to be able to have a composite function. Okay. So when you composite 2 functions, you get this kind of graphical image. All right. Now, F composition G of X, or F of G of X, with the symbol little circle representing composition. The composition of 2 functions is combining them so that the output of the first function is the input of the second function. 2 examples of this are, we just did one, which was multiple discounts. First discount, $100 off. Second discount, 75% off. And another example is a discount followed by a tax. Now that happens at the store all the time. If you're a cashier at the store, you'd say, oh, this is 25% off. So you multiply the original price by 0.75. And then you have to add like an 8% tax, and you multiply it by 1.08. 1 returns back the regular price, and the 0.08 adds a tax of 8%. Okay, so we got 2 things happening, and just like we did before, the output of the first function, the output of the discount, is the input to the tax. You tax not the original price, but only the output of the discounted price. All right. Now, using this idea with multiple functions is the math behind the breakthrough idea of the assembly line, which forever changed mass production. In fact, some historians claim that it wasn't until the assembly line that we started legitimately having a middle class in America. And does anybody know the company or the person who first came up with the idea of the assembly line? Yes?
Was Ford, right?
Yes, Henry Ford. That's right, Model T Ford. And prior to Henry Ford, let me switch over to the camera. Yeah, prior to Henry Ford, how they made cars was you bring along the chassis of the car, and then a team of workers would all put on the wheel. And then they'd all work together and shift over, they'd put on the steering wheel. And then they'd put in seats, and so, this small team of people had to be trained to do all the different jobs. And Henry Ford's breakthrough idea was, I'm just going to have everybody do one simple thing all day. One person, all he does is put on the wheel, put on a bottom left wheel all day. And one person is putting on the steering wheel all day, etc. And the problem with this, though, was that the second guy in the line has nothing to do until the first guy is done. And so if the first guy gets hung up on his job, it takes him longer, that delays everybody down the line. So he really had to think this out really well to give everybody tasks that could all be done in the same amount of time, so that we could get, eventually get a car in each of the different stations. And then they just move along at the same pace. I grew up in the Detroit area, and my I have 5 sisters and a brother, and my third oldest sister, she got married. My father worked for Ford, and he had been in management for a while, and he pulled some strings, and he got my brother-in-law a job on the assembly line. And my brother-in-law told me about working there. He said, my gosh, the hours, 8 hours of doing the same thing over and over was tough to get used to. And but he made a ton of money. And then he also got in the union, and then because after he'd gotten some seniority, he got to switch to doing a real nice job, which was kind of a plumber internally. And that gave him a lot of variety, and he really liked doing that job. But that assembly line thing, that is the same kind of thing, is that the output of the first is the input of the second. The output of the second function is the input of the third function. They chained all these together. Now this idea, let's come back to this picture. I think we'd have a whole bunch more functions in here for an assembly line, but this happens in many situations where you have something complex happening, and they say, hey, there's something going on behind the scenes. Maybe we can figure out what are the individual functions doing, and then we can really understand what's going on. And then sometimes it's the opposite of that. Sometimes they can see all these individual things, and then they have finally this big one right over here. So a couple of these, let me give you another example of this, is number of horses to number of bales of hay, because maybe each horse every month eats 4 bales of hay. So number of horses to the number of bales of hay. And then the next function might be the number of bales of hay to the cost, because each bale of hay might cost $30. And so then you've got 2 individual functions, but then you put them together, because all you really want to know in the end is this many horses is going to cost me this much money to feed. And so you skip over all the details, you get this overall function. And so this is the kind of analysis that this composition of function allows, And it's kind of the theoretical underpinning behind this revolutionized mass production. All right, so now what I have on OneNotes, and I've talked to you about each of you getting OneNotes. Make sure that you can access it yourself. It'll be very handy. And what I put on the OneNotes is the same worksheet that we just did, and with many of the answers. Not every single answer, but most of them. So if you kind of were a little confused on some portion, there's a little bit of overlap over here. Yes, this one, the student work on composition of functions. Let me get this down. Yeah, some things get pushed down when I create space and some don't, so I have to Alright, so then there is a worksheet on student homework on composition of functions. And here's the horse example. And it asks you to set things up very similar to what we did with the other one. And then here's another example with shirts on sale and then subject to a tax. So sale and then a tax, and it has you then ask you to even draw the diagram. And the tuition. And so this part that I put in OneNotes isn't quite super readable. But you will find this in its most readable format in the modules. So let me go to student view. Okay, so we've been doing what? This is 3.4 composition of functions. Alright, so you'll see down here, combining and transforming functions, homework worksheet on composition of functions. So when you go to here, if you click on this, send you to this, gives you the student homework on composition of functions, and there it's in a nice, very readable format. So that's the homework that's assigned today. Is instead of from the textbook, it's this student homework on composition of functions worksheet that you find in the modules. And are there any questions? All right, if no questions, groups 3 and 4, will you hang on for a minute and let me just check. I want to make sure that there's enough people in the group and everybody's on track here. And for the rest, we will stop, and let me stop the recording.